So with that, we're going to move to Sara Lenzi. So Sara, go ahead and take it over.
Thank you, Kate. I'm flattered. I'm not sure I was critical to the success of the Audible universe, but thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me here. Thank you, Anita, for the first part. There's a lot of overlapping, I think, between our two presentations and the way it ended, particularly about how do we make choices when we start to a new sonification project. So what I will present is about that. And I'll share. Where is the slideshow? All good? Do you see the first slide that reads the data sonification canvas?
Yes, we see the slide and the slide only.
Okay, great. That's great. So the data sonification canvas is a tool for sonification design. I'll get to what a tool for designers is before you think that it's any fancy digital or interactive application. Is basically a piece of paper, either a literal piece of paper or a digital piece of paper. So the real critical part of being a tool is in what it says in the contents, but a very quick overview, where does the canvas come from? Anita already, thank you for that, introduced the Data Sonification Archive. So the canvas is part of a bigger project that dates back to my PhD research and the work we've been doing at the Density Design Lab in Politecnico di Milano, which is an information design lab, a data visualization lab, where I had the pleasure to introduce sound. So when I was there, we started this project of the Data Sonification Archive. That basically started with me collecting a few cases, a few sonification projects, and see how I could look into that to gather relevant information to inform my projects. So selfish endeavor. I start collecting disparate. The goal was to map the sonification world. Who is doing sonification? Why? Where? And then another one of these fancy diagrams, but basically what Anita showed earlier, where we used also in the review study for sonification for astronomy, is the way that we at the Data Sonification Archive classify projects. This has been an iterative process, and at the moment we are using these categories, and now we just we are in the process of launching a new version of the archive where you will be able to search using this classification, which is the one we use when we curate new projects. So we analyze existing sonification projects by their intended goal. So why was this sonification done? Is it an artwork? Was it accessibility? I mean, Anita went through these categories, so I will skip, but we can go back. And of course, you will have this presentation later. Other questions we ask ourselves: who are the intended users? What sonification method was used? The sonification community over the decades agreed on certain methods that are codified and are defined, like parameter mapping, audification. We currently classify the new projects. We classified existing projects on the archive. So it's not a coincidence that this classification was also in Anita's diagram, that I will not go through it too much unless you can ask me any questions you have later. So we classify by their intended goal, as mentioned by Anita. Is it an artwork? Is it accessibility? Is it for real-time monitoring? By their intended users, domain expert, general public, by the method, the sonification method they used. The sonification community has defined several methods that are accepted and have their own definition and scientific literature, like audification, parameter mapping, and then, of course, media mix. We talked about it already, and the micro topic. So you heard me say intended goal, intended audience. So in the design world, be it, product design or experience design or service design, what designers say is that a prerequisite is the why we are doing that and the impact you want to have on the real world. We define this as intentionality in design. It is basically all those decisions that we make when we design something, we create something, and we are asking ourselves, what do I want to communicate with this? What is the real world problem or phenomena in our case I want to represent, and for whom? Intentionality of this slide is really to show the other piece of information that we used to define the canvas. That was basically, why are people designing, doing sonification? And we created this, we defined a continuum where we analyzed existing cases, and we said some of these cases are better at communicating, are more successful in that sense, and some other of these successful meaning they use the right metaphors that we discussed with Anita, color blue water bubbles, or they use the right medium, or they use the right combination of sensory modalities. And some others, perhaps they are not so successful, but not because they are badly designed, rather that because the authors perhaps didn't ask themselves these questions. Why and how am I doing that? The last piece of information was my work with authors of sonifications that I interviewed at length to come out really with what mattered to them, what were the critical decisional points they were using to create a new sonification. And from all that, we said, okay, we have now all this information. How do we put it together in a tool that can be useful, that can be replicable in other contexts and by other people? And we decided to instantiate this research in a design canvas. This is what a design canvas looks like. There are for many things, designing new businesses or products. It all goes back to what was successfully commercialized as the design thinking method, but it really comes from a design research and the reflection of what it means to be a designer, where versus being an engineer or being an artist. What makes design unique? In the lab where I was, we already used something called the visualization canvas, and then we mimic, in a way, we borrowed that format to come up with what is today the data sonification canvas, which is this rectangular piece of paper defined by 4 building blocks. So I will go into each of these building blocks, but the idea of the canvas was really to provide a self-reflection tool, something that anyone, regardless of their expertise in sound or expertise with data, if they wanted to integrate sound in any information representation project, specifically data sonification project in this case. So the canvas, the current version, because we have a new version in preparation, there are limits to this format that I will go through later, hopefully, unless it's the room. So the first block really asks you to define your use case. We found, talking to experts, authors of sonification, and through the work at the archive, that not everybody asked themselves really, who will be my listeners? What are the goals of what I'm doing, and what is the context of the sonification? Maybe we can already, Kate, go to the next one that is about the first block. Yep, and then next again. Yep, so the parts of the first use case block are visually split in users, goals, context. And what really we are trying to stimulate someone that is starting a sonification project is to ask herself or himself questions such as, who will at the end listen to this? So do they have any stake? Are they stakeholder in a specific process? So if we are doing sonification for astronomers, are our final listeners astronomers or non-astronomers? Or is it a political issue or a social issue that we are trying to represent? And then do these people that will listen to it have a specific opinion about it? Are we trying to convince them that they are wrong or reinforce that they are right? I mean, all really, even the ethical responsibility when we do something like that, because we are communicating something, whether we want it or not. In fact, the new version of the canvas will have another block that is called consequences. So is what we are doing, these new sounds we are introducing, are they meaningful? Are they sustainable in the broader picture? You know, it really asks you to think about that and take your decisions accordingly. And it is meant to be an iterative process. So the whole idea of also having this piece of paper is to fill in one and then a second one and then a third one and then go back to the first one and see how the project has changed, is really also to help you document your reflection process. The goals, ideas of questions, we put in ideas, and then it really depends on the specificities of your project. But it's really your goal as an author, your goal as a sonifier. Are you addressing specific needs? And what are these specific needs? The idea is that you try to be as specific as you can here. And this will really greatly help you along the way. At least this is the hope. We can move, Kate. Sorry, I have to ask you that. And the context, also ideas of questions for the context. This is the context of experiencing the sonification when it will be released and published. Is it an online, is it an interactive web page, or is it a physical installation in a physical space? Are listeners using headphones, for instance? This greatly changes the decisions you will take along the way. Cultural connotations is also a perhaps underexplored area of reflection in sonification, but are the sounds I'm using like universally understandable? Or maybe they aren't, because this is not the goal of my project. And we can go to another block. This is a bit more technical, maybe considering that we are also late due to my issues. I will not go too deeply into that. We can
You're actually okay, because Leaf isn't here, and we're gonna go till after. We've got till 9:30 if we need it.
Okay, thank you. So this is really about the specificities of data sonification. So it really asks you to reflect on your raw material, your tools, your rules that you will apply to the project. So what are the sounds you are going to use? Behavior stands for how does sound change over time depending on changes in the data set? What is its semantic function? This we are starting getting a bit into technicalities. And then is it combined with other modalities, as Anita discussed earlier? So next slide, please, Kate. Types of sounds. Here, really, the idea was to, again, stimulate a reflection on choosing your sounds. Many times, the choices of what types of sound we use in a sonification might be dictated by the tools we have and how skilled we are in sound design. If we aren't, and we use a program that gives us MIDI piano sounds, then we most likely will go for MIDI piano sounds, regardless of whether they are the most appropriate. So there might be contingent decisions. Even so, it's good that we are aware of that. And perhaps we think of reaching out to a friend that is a sound designer and expanding the team, as Anita was saying, because of course we are not expected to be experts in everything. So are the choices of sounds we are making limited by our skills or by our technologies? And if we could instead have whatever we want, then what will these sounds sound like? A behavior is about the rules that link changes in the data sets to changes in the sounds, the so-called mapping rules. Are we leveraging psychoacoustics, for instance, as in Anita's research? Or are we using instead embodied metaphors? It's another framework. So this refers to what really controls how sound changes. Bruce could talk about one of his most famous, perhaps, experiments with visually impaired users, listeners, sighted and blind listeners who interpreted the mapping metaphors completely opposite ways. So again, what is the criteria that we use when we establish these rules? And next slide. Functions is there is another one before. Kate, I think, yeah. Functions comes from the world of semiotics. So back when we worked on the canvas, we also had several workshops with information designers who came from the design field, strictly speaking. So they also had a training in semiotics. And at that time, it seemed like a good idea to reflect on this. It turns out to be a bit, technical, complex to gauge by people that are not trained either in philosophy or communication sciences. So we might remove it. But anyway, is the idea to reflect on how connected is this sound that we are using with the real world phenomenon that it stands for. With the idea that this would guide or give you ideas again on choices that you may want to make. So are you opting for for a causal connection, like we represent rainfalls and we use the sound of rain? Do we want to do that? So literal, it might be appropriate for a specific context or for a specific audience. Or instead, do we want to use sounds as auditory icons? Is it an icon of something that is real? Like we use a sound of throwing paper, the famous Apple sound that has been discontinued, right? We are crushing a piece of paper to represent the bin. Or is it really arbitrary, as it might happen with musical sounds, with the trumpet? I decided I go for the trumpet because it's an homage to my past. That's perfectly legit. Just the more you are aware, the more your audience will be, most likely. And then what are the other modalities you combine sonification with, if any? And we can go to the next. Okay, thank you. Yep. And then so what we called back then sonification approach. This is really about overarching intentions. And this is borrowed from visualization, where some authors proposed a framework where there's a big overarching polarity in data visualization from a design perspective, where you are asked to decide to position your work in this continuum between an analytical intention, where you really need your audience to understand hard values in a data set, maybe because they have to take decisions based on that, maybe because they are operators in a control room, so they have tasks associated with understanding specific data values. Or is your intention narrative? Are you telling a story to engage the general public? Another thing that Anita was saying earlier, right? These are very broad, generic distinctions, but they bring about a lot of other secondary decisions. So they are critical. And we can go to and of course, this could change. Yeah, this was an example. It could change even over the course of the project. So it's something that we say, ask yourself when you start, and then you might change your idea as you go. And it's also good to go back and see how the perspective has changed and what is the relative weight of an analytical versus a narrative approach. And the last block, thank you, Kate. It's about, this is borrowed from sound design for films theory, that actually from Michel Chion's work, that also borrows from Pierre Schaeffer, perhaps the father of electroacoustic music, and his definition of the audience listening experience. when we hear electronic sounds that are somehow disconnected from the real world. We don't see a musician making a gesture that results in a sound. This disconnection requires an additional attentive listening, as Anita was saying. Again, thank you, Anita, for all these inputs. And Michel Chion defines 3 different listening attitudes that we as designers, as composers, need to imagine, because then the sound we make, the sonification we make, should have this expectation embedded already. Causal is like listening attitude, a listening experience that we have in everyday life. We tend to have, when we hear a sound, we tend to connect the sound with the source that produced it. Again, rain, oh, it's raining. Dogs bark, there is a dog. This is the causal connection. So if we use in a sonification barking sounds, most likely people will think of dogs. If we don't want them to think of dogs, maybe we should opt for a different sound or provide more context or make other decisions. The semantic listening attitude is where we need a code to understand the sound. Music, Western classical music, sonata form, it has a specific code, it has a specific grammar. If understanding this grammar is part of what we expect our listeners to do, then we need to be ready to provide enough information. And reduced, finally, is something that typically sound designers or sound artists would do, which is listen to the sound, to the pure sound, to its acoustic components, the change in pitch, the timbre of the sound. So really we focus on the sound abstracted from external meanings. This is quite typical, I would say, in digital sound. So we are listening to understand, for instance, is it this sound clean enough? Is it clear that the pitch shifts, and etc. So this is very specific from electroacoustic music. And again, we put it there at the beginning, thinking that it was an interesting input. It might be a bit difficult to understand. Even so, it is something that we do in sonification, like in the examples of Anita, when we ask our listeners to focus on the change of pitch, regardless of whether this is a piano sound or is a human voice. Just focus on how the frequency changes. This is reduced listening. If we don't want our listeners to do that, then we need to change the type of sound or change the way we describe our work. We can move, Kate, because this is what I just said. This is just quickly, if you are more interested more than what I can say today, there is a paper where we described a first mini evaluation study that we conducted. We asked 50 participants and about half came back. We used an existing format for evaluating digital experiences, digital products. It's called attractive. It measures the pragmatic quality, which is this product doing what you intended to do? And then the hedonic qualities, which is, does it also appears to its users? HQ is hedonic quality I in the graph diagram at the right, which stands for identification. So do I really feel that this tool is something I want to use? Does it fit with my life and my values? And the other is S stands for motivation, which doesn't start with S. There's another word that I don't remember now, how is it defined? Stimulation, I think. But anyway, it's defined as, how motivated you are in using this tool for your work. And we performed quite well. Interestingly, the summary of all the variables that are used in attractive, which is at the left side, said that is a self-oriented tool, which we were quite pleased about, because this is really how we designed, how we imagined the canvas. And there are other data, but I don't think is relevant. I mean, I didn't put them in the presentation. So, Kate, we can move to the other one, because also with some of these participants, a good chunk, like 10 people came back also with additional feedback, and we had conversations with them. All these people that participated were users of the Canvas, had used it at least once, but usually more than once in the past previous 12 months. So they did confirm that it was a useful tool for self-reflection during the entire process. So from the inception of the project, where you can also start to categorize the same way we do in the archive, categorize existing projects to gather ideas. But then overall, the entire project to support the decisional process. And if you are working in a larger team, or if you have a specific client, you can also use it to establish a common language, which is also critical in a field like that. That is, let's say, it involves often people with different backgrounds. But then areas to improve, I think they are very relevant for us, because the format, it's a PDF, it's not accessible, it's very the accessibility features are very limited. We used it in the Audible universe on a PowerPoint. In fact, there was more accessible. We are thinking of implementing a new version online, but that wouldn't make this specific aspect easier. So any advice on this will be very welcome, because other critical annotations were that of course, the description of some blocks are too technical, so we are revisiting that. And the language, you can't embed multimedia content on a PDF, on a printed piece of paper. That's why we thought of platforms like Canvas or Miro, but those are even worse than PDF for accessibility, as far as I know. And then, of course, there is the rectangular shape, there is this order, but this reflects our order. So we should provide a format where people can move around the blocks and deconstruct them as they wish. So we are working on that. Any help, more than welcome. And I think the last slide is about future steps, but is what I already said. So thank you. There's another slide with a reference. If you want to go, this is, I say, the official publication where you find everything that I said here. And my apologies again for these hiccups. Thank you, Mathieu, for jumping in the room. Yeah, and that's it. Here I am.
That I actually really like that you have some of those more technical aspects, like the philosophical kind of bent to it on the semiotics. Even if somebody, like on their first go around didn't feel kind of equipped to fill those in, I think it's really good to have it there and to get people thinking about it. And it's something that can be taught. Yes, maybe some people would need it to be taught. That's fine, but it can be taught, and it's a really useful bit of information to have on there. And it's also useful even if somebody didn't fill it in. If like you mentioned, if you're showing this canvas to someone, to a client or user, and the person who filled out the canvas didn't put that information in there, well, that's good to know too. Like if I were on the receiving end, I would want to know, were you thinking about this? Did you make decisions in this regard? Are you unsure of this? So I think it's really valuable, and maybe you just need to someone, maybe not you, but someone would need to come up with kind of a good little teaching resource to help explain some of those more technical, philosophical aspects of the Canvas. But otherwise, I think it's really great. I thought it was a really great presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks for this. It's, very interesting feedback. It's probably more about finding the appropriate language and providing the description or a user manual. I mean, it's true. We learn so many things.
Yeah, well, and I think you can have the technical language too, like to show people that exists, and then just also have kind of more familiar language that would help a broader audience understand it. So both and rather than either or, I think.
And I thought a valuable way to teach that or learn that was to be doing, going through an example in a group where you didn't have that expertise, but somebody else did. And that back and forth conversation was an enjoyable way to acquire that skill, but also knowing that when you're doing that analysis in a group, you didn't have to be an expert on every bit of it before you could move forward. So again, that idea that you've got a multidisciplinary group and you have them for a reason, because learning everything is hard. Adrian, did you have something you wanted to add? Oh, you look like you were ready.
I think Anita maybe had a question or comment too. Mine was just very quick. I'm wondering about where do the aesthetics aspects fit in? Is that in the and emotionality, or if that's even a word, but where do aesthetics and emotion fit into the design process?
In my view, everywhere. I mean, it's the idea of reflecting on the process is really, it really goes in that direction. I say that, I mean, design itself for me is defined as really a functional endeavor with attention to the aesthetic experience, to the aesthetic quality of what you do, and asking yourself, sometimes positioning these choices as aesthetics or emotion related is still such a taboo in many fields. It's surprising, but it is so. The moment you say the word aesthetic, some of the people that you are talking with, absolutely in good faith, will think that you are thinking of adding sparkles and colors at the end of the process. So the idea of pushing someone to reflect on what sounds am I choosing. I think that then the aesthetic judgment will come in anyways, necessarily, because most of the sounds that are ugly to hear is because they weren't chosen at all. That's in my experience. Then Anita said earlier, scientists will not need pleasant sounds. I agree. It's just that they're pleasant in that context. They are useful, they are functional, they have an aesthetic, but aesthetic doesn't necessarily mean beauty. It means that the sensory experience attached to those sounds is appropriate for the project. And most likely is also sustainable over the time that a scientist will need to listen to. Otherwise, they will change it. Otherwise, they will not use it. So if it is appropriate to the context, if it is appropriate to your user, if it meets the expectations of your listener, and if you chose it for a reason, I think this stands for attention to the aesthetic experience. Rather than rather than thinking this sound because it's nicer, which is also, it might be appropriate. It's really context dependent. So
Okay, sure, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can, I only had a quick question. Thanks, Sara. Presentation was beautiful. I might have missed it. What kind of users evaluated your canvas? Sorry if you mentioned it.
Yeah, I didn't quote it in this. It was not in this presentation. It's in the article. So I sent it out to 50 people that we knew used the canvas before. There was a good part of astronomers from the audible universe. Maybe some of you also participated. There were information designers that used it before, either in a commercial context, in the industry, like people I knew that worked with cars, auditory display for cars, researchers that used it as an analysis tool, so mostly to map a specific field of sonification, researchers also that work in the field of sonification and visualization. So maybe Bruce left, but we are also involved in this informal group of two worlds, visualization and sonification, and we are trying to compare strategies and come to a mutual understanding. Nancy, so people that worked in this field and that I knew used the canvas for analysis rather than to create new sonifications. And then some journalists that also work with sound. I have the breakdown exactly of how many. Researchers were the majority though, but researchers not directly in the field of sound. Yeah.
And do you think the feedback was fairly homogeneous, or different backgrounds were leading to different kind of feedback?
No, it was very homogeneous.
Okay.
Yeah, very homogeneous. There is another specific, there's another diagram that breaks down answers, especially because attractive work with pairs of semantic oppositions to rate each quality. So it would say good, bad, ugly, beautiful, and so on. So there were some extreme answers, more in the sense, some word pairs would be not so appropriate for the canvas, like innovative or brave and bold or conservative. And there is where you can see big differences. I don't know to what extent those are applicable, in fact, to the canvas. It wasn't designed with the idea of being, disruptive for the field. But we decided to use this questionnaire because it's already validated, is used, and it is in that sense. However, for the new version, we interpreted this being, say, innovative or bold, I think was the term. As in, for instance, if we provide a way that it can be very customizable in the experience, that there will be, it is conservative in the sense that it replicates the format of canvases that is already used often, perhaps too much. I know plenty of people that, tell me, I hate canvases. They are everywhere. They became meaningless. So that could be reflected, but I wouldn't say there was a relationship with the background of participants.
Yeah, which is very encouraging, right? It means it can be used across disciplines and backgrounds. Thank you.
Well, we are going to wrap this up, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today.